Hi, and welcome to another episode of Mastering Finance, the podcast. I'm Jarrell.
Nicholas Higgs.
And today we have a very, very exciting episode for you. Today we're going to talk about inheritance to innovation, the Bonneville Bones story. Now, many of our listeners, particularly in the Bahamas, will be very familiar with Bonneville Bones. It's been around for years, and quite frankly, I've had the fortune of actually working there as a younger guy. And so today, to help us tell this story, we have Ryen Fox, who is one of the proprietors of Bonneville Bones. Ryen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming.
So Ryen, as the title says, inheritance to innovation, Bonneville Bones is sort of a staple of the retail industry in the Bahamas. There have been, I'm sure thousands of men who've, shopped at you guys' stores, women who've bought tons of gifts for their significant others and otherwise. But a lot of people probably don't know the real story behind Bonneville Bones. So, start by letting us know and sharing with us a little bit about the story.
In 1970 is when Bonneville Bones was opened. The name was actually the London Boutique for Men and Women. There were 5 owners, a mix of Bahamians and British owners. And like I said, it was for men and women in the beginning. The original location was on Bay and George Street.
Right across from the Pompey?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, kind of adjacent, yeah. But just across from there, upstairs. It was upstairs only for about 25 years. So yeah, like in the mid-90s is when they renovated the Lightbourne Pharmacy downstairs and took over that space. So we still occupied upstairs and downstairs. Upstairs was storage and offices, and the downstairs was the actual retail space.
And your father was instrumental in Bonneville Bones at a point. What point did he get involved in the business?
Right, so he started with Bonneville when it was still upstairs in the early 1970s, straight out of high school, thinking it would just be like a summer job. He had intentions to move to the States and go to school for architecture, but it never happened, and he was just very industrious, worked really hard, loved fashion, was a good worker, and continued to climb that ladder and acquire shares in the business over time. And he eventually became a fundamental part of the business to the point where he became the sole owner.
Yeah, now, I remember vividly, I think I must have been 14 years old, working at Bonneville Bones at that same location. And there's this tall, slanky, old man, Caucasian guy, who would come into the store, very cool, very cordial, very unassuming, right? And I later found out that he was, I guess you can say, Mr. Bones himself, right? Quite literally. So to hear you say that, your father acquired shares over time speaks to several things. One, sort of, eliminates this sort of, call it rumor, or demystifies this saying or thought that, persons from different backgrounds can't necessarily work together. But did your father ever share with you, maybe some important conversations that happened, some of the business principles that he learned from Mr. Bones that led him to make a decision to forego, university to be a part of Bonneville Bones?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest things that Bones contributed to my dad was, as they traveled, exposing him to more around the world, thus diversifying his tastes. And through those experiences and through acquiring that exposure, he became even more fashionable and more edgy, and his own natural good taste allowed him to kind of put a spin on it in a sales way or merchandising things for locals. For a long time, Bonneville Bones was known to have like the edgiest of what was available in men's fashion or even women's fashion, and that was my father's touch along with Bones, working together in that way. Something that definitely sticks with me that I've learned from my dad, along from having good taste, as the expression goes, is being a person of integrity when it comes to business. In our culture, you have a lot of people that will cut corners and try to circumvent taxes and various things to save money. That's something that my father never stood for, and that's definitely two of the biggest things that I still carry with me is being a person of integrity, business-wise, and having good taste.
So when you look at the fashion industry from 1970 to now, moving from downtown to the mall and another location at Harbor Bay, was the focus really on tourists at the time, high-end or high-net-worth individual Bahamians, and as a transition to the Mall at Marathon? What was the demographic or the focus in the past, and is it still the same demographic now?
Well, I've been made to understand that when they first opened, it was about being fairly accessible to everybody. Bay Street was the main shopping hub for Bahamians at the time. Like now, you couldn't pay someone to go downtown to shop because it's mostly about the banking and the tourists and so on, or people who actually work downtown. Other than that, Bahamians are not typically going on Bay Street to shop. However, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, that wasn't the case. Bahamians frequented Bay Street for everything that they needed, especially when it came down to like shopping for a Friday night out or a special event. And as that has changed, as that pattern has evolved, we've made ourselves more accessible to locals because they had still always been our main customer. Even while we were still on Bay Street, our main customer would have been, our spending customer would have been locals. So by moving to Harbor Bay, it was our effort to make ourselves more accessible with parking and people just being in Harbor Bay to shop. And then at the mall, of course, that's still a main shopping hub for a lot of people here in Nassau.
Yeah, so interestingly, like we're talking about inheritance, we're talking about innovation, and you mentioned that you guys have locations in Harbor Bay at the Mall at Marathon, and you made a switch or move from downtown. And so, everyone knows that change is always very difficult. Those decisions are always very difficult. And having been around for so long successfully, walk us through some of the challenges that you kind of faced when you kind of stepped up to the helm, specifically around, keeping the team motivated, persons who would have been there for 10, 20 years. Just kind of tell us a little bit about how you step up to challenges and approach that sort of stuff.
Honestly, that has been one of the most difficult things I've probably ever had to do in my life. When my father passed, I was actually 5 months pregnant.
Wow.
So that transition with everything else that was going on in my personal life was extremely difficult. Not just the grieving aspect of it, but the fact that I was pregnant, emotionally trying to juggle all these new responsibilities was extremely difficult. Keeping people motivated, honestly, I have to say that most of their motivation must have been for the love that they had for him and the work that he had put in the past 50 years since that he had been there. And to this day, I think that is a large driving factor when it comes to the staff that we have. The majority of the staff we have now is that original staff from the 80s, from like the mid to late 80s, that is still with us. So I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that they're motivated by me or anything I've done, but I think that the example that he set for them and the leader that he was, that was so impactful that it has kept them motivated.
So if I may take it back a little bit, how long were you always in the industry, working in the business from young?
Bonneville Bones would have been my first job. I started when I was 14 as well. At that time, we had our second location in the mall, but it wasn't where it is now, which is where the Mike's shoe store used to be. That's where we are now, opposite Dollar Plus.
You're going way back.
Yeah. Before we were there, we were opposite where John Bull is now in the mall, and it was a much smaller space, even smaller than the space we have in Harbor Bay now, right? They did really well there in the first few years, and that's why they were able to expand to the other location. I did not know that I would be in the position I am in today. Ironically though, one of my first dream jobs as a child was to be a fashion designer. So at heart, I am a creative, always have been, right? The ownership of the business by the time I was 14 wasn't one where I thought that I would automatically be sliding into a position of inheritance, but to me it was just exciting. This is where my dad works. He has like shares here and everything else. It was just exciting for me to be around him and see what was going on, to be out of the house, to have a job, making a salary. I did not anticipate ownership until much later on.
Yeah, I think there's a difference when you're the creative space. We're just going to create, innovate, and then when you're on the operational side, it's very different. At what point was it when you got to the helm of the company, or was it before that when you started seeing the non-romantic side of it when it's the operational side?
Yes, I want to say about 5 to 8 years before my father passed, I was more included in making certain changes on the business aspect of the company. So not just buying and marketing. Now we're talking about organizing accounts, taking salary pay from being cash to check to online pay to organizing things on our corporate banking side. And just having to kind of learn as I went along. As we discussed earlier before we started recording, I don't even have like, I'm not, what's the word? Business.
Savvy,
No.
inclined.
Bachelor's?
College. Yeah.
Oh,
Right. I didn't go to school for business. So I had to learn as I went along, learn from him and just use pretty much common sense to figure out what the best move would be to get things to continue to run in an efficient manner.
so a lot of persons, when they're children of successful businesses or business owners, sometimes they want to run from the business, sometimes they're excited, sometimes they feel entitled to having this role. How were, is it two sisters as well?
I have 2 older sisters, yeah.
Who are involved in the business as well. And so how do you navigate a family business where there are 3 successful sisters working in this business? How do you then you have to go home with the family?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do you manage the family side, dealing with the patriarch of the business?
Also in the house. It was not easy. Mr. Robinson was a man's man, as the expression goes. He was very much a leader, very much what I say goes kind of person. So when we're younger and teenagers, it's pretty much fine because we're kids. But as you get closer to adulthood and you want to kind of get your own footing as an individual, that's when the kind of push and pull started to come in.
Get some more courage.
Yeah, you start to get a little bit more courage, or you want to say, well, Daddy, I think it should go like this, or Daddy, I think it should go like that. Of course, he's your dad, so it's just like, shut up. You don't know, like, hush, you don't know what you're talking about, do what I say. And honestly, there were moments when it was very discouraging, but we always knew that it was his intention for us to eventually take over from where he would have left off. Me personally, did I try to pull away? Countless times, but the love I had for him, and also as much as he would explain to me, like, I'm trying to put you in a position where you can be your own boss, like for something that's already made. I heard the words, but say for it to really sink in, not until I was almost 30. At this point, I was like married for like 5 years and still was trying to like pull away and do my own thing. But in retrospect, I definitely appreciate him not giving up on including my sisters and I.
And I mean, because it seems like, you know, even though he was your dad, there were years of mentorship, right? Like lots of opportunity to learn, to make mistakes, right? So, like when you think about all that you would have learned from him, right, about the business itself, and this is just going to take us outside the business for a second, and just talk about the retail industry generally speaking, right? Understanding the cycles, you know, you make most of your money on the latter part of the year, right? How did you handle that? Like, was there, you know, even though you would have had an idea, right, was there a sense of panic during the times when, you know, revenues weren't coming in at the pace we thought they were, or, you know, the festive season didn't seem to be pacing like we thought it would? Like, how did you deal with that?
Experiencing it firsthand without Daddy there as a safety net, so to speak, because he was already used to the ebbs and flows of it all, but having to actually be in the driver's seat and watch it happen, it was absolutely nerve-wracking, to be honest. But you realize, look, if he was able to do this for all these years, there must be, like, there was a learning curve, like you said, to avoid that panic, so you don't stress yourself into insanity. You just kind of have to, like I said, trust the process, watch the numbers, and learn how to pace yourself. And in my case, I had to learn to rely heavily on others to manage different aspects of the company. My father was very much the micro and macro managing person. He was all managing styles mixed into one. But I quickly learned that I couldn't do it the way that he did. So the learning curve for me was that, look, I need to lean on other people. As a wife and mother, my focus is completely different. I'm not coming home to a cooked meal from my wife. You know, I still have to uphold my responsibilities. So throwing that into the mix, realizing that I couldn't do it the way that he did, and I had to rely on my sisters and the existing staff to keep us afloat and to keep everybody level, that was the biggest learning curve, I think, for
And
me.
just for the audience, what year did you take over?
Daddy died in 2021.
So you took over in the heart of COVID.
Like
COVID-19,
just
yeah.
on the tail end of,
And before 2021, around 2020, 2019, what was your role then in the business?
I pretty much was his right hand for just about every and anything. Anything from, Ryen, there's a problem in the bathroom, call the plumber, or Ryen, we need to contact a vendor for a particular thing, I'll make the order. Ryen, our accountant needs statements from the bank XYZ, like acquiring information for our accountants. We need a letter for HR, we need new scheduling, there's an issue with ePay, like every
Jack of all trades.
aspect of the business, I had my hand in the jar.
So for those listeners who we have who are in the retail space, the retail space, it could be where they're selling drinks, clothes, doesn't matter. There's still changes in the industry. What's advice would you give to someone for navigating those changes that come in the retail space? This is even pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, if there are changes. What's your advice on that side?
The first thing is to always be willing to spin on a dime. Like at any point in time, you may have to change your course. That's what COVID taught us.
Yes, it did.
Writing things down. I know that might sound like a small thing, but okay, if you've done something a particular way, not just relying on yourself to remember that if this comes up again, this is how I did it. If you need to hand this task over to someone, if you have your process written down, it's easier for you to hand the task off. So if you start that process early on, when you're in a position to allocate tasks, it'll be easier for you and the people involved. And even if you're not handing the task off, you have that note for yourself. That's something that I had to really manage, was remembering my processes and being able to teach my processes to stay organized. Because there's so many layers to running a business. It's impossible to, let me not say impossible. It's extremely difficult to do it all and stay sane.
I completely agree. In the corporate world, they always speak about the SOPs, the policies, the guidance notes. And in the entrepreneurial space, it's usually considered we're just moving. We're just trying to get it done. But for a successful business, when we're talking about scaling, when we're talking about becoming efficient and delegating, that comes from those efficiencies, writing it down. Simply, this is how, and when we check inventory, this is when we're going to make sure that this is how we can make sure we're as efficient with our electricity costs. We make sure the the AC is only in this area, so we keep it with energy efficiency. And so they don't have to be, should be long policies signed by the board, and you don't have to go through all of that. It could literally be just, this is how we answer phone calls. This is how we started. This is who to go to for issues. So I completely agree with you that that's something entrepreneurs kind of put to the side, but that is imperative. And if you just start with a few, and you say every week I'm gonna write 2 or 3, over time you'll look back and realize I could pass on this entire section because the processes are there.
Exactly. And it keeps your mind organized. And I think that was the biggest task for me, with everything going on, being pregnant, just having lost my dad, all these things, keeping my mind organized was the most difficult thing. So I think even if I wasn't under all those other stresses, that would have been good practice. And looking back on it, that's something that Mr. Robinson also did. When we were clearing out the offices downtown, I came across notes from the 90s of him writing down like checklists for himself, or even like, because I had access to his email, him making notes to himself to tell me something. So when I realized that I did it too, I'm just like, you know what, this is really important. And I feel like people on any business level can benefit from just recording.
Expectations, I want to go there a little bit. When you're taking on this role, what expectations did you have for yourself versus expectations that the company had for you? And so let's start there, and then I want to kind of shift into how did you manage those expectations? So what type of expectations did you set for yourself?
I'm smiling because I'm laughing at myself. I thought that I could do it. I really thought that I could do it by myself. No fair. And that's honestly probably one of my worst character traits. Like, I can be so fearless and so cavalier. Like, I see something, I'm going. I think about nothing, just jump straight off the cliff, going for it. Yeah. It can sound like really cool and exciting, but when it comes to dealing with dollar bills and money and being responsible for other people's well-being, you can't be like that. I really had to pull myself back and learn how to ask for help and learn how to not just ask for help, but then actually trust people to help you do the things that you ask them to do. So my expectation was that I could do it, but I quickly learned that I couldn't do it by myself, and learning to rely on my sisters and the whole team, yeah.
What about the expectations the company had on you when you're taking over? They say, hey, you're going to run this company for a successful business from 1970. Was it a list of things to do, or was it almost like just do what your daddy did?
Exactly that.
Especially with them looking at you from like the 14-year-old.
From a little child. They've known me since my mother was pregnant with me. They knew me, okay? I think the expectation was that I would slide in and just be just like him or do things the way that he did. Now, maybe that's not how they felt, but that's how I felt that they felt. And it took me some time to step away from that and to show people and to tell them, like, look, I can't do it the way he did it. We're not even the same gender, we're not the same age, it's not the same period of time. Everything is completely different. I have to do this my own way. Yeah. You know?
Wow.
So when we get to operations, I always speak with accounts. Accounts is not easy. And so for you, who hasn't been for the quote unquote traditional training for it, and managing a successful business, dealing with the account side, the operation side, the HR, maintaining the relationship with your sisters through this, allocating it. How did you put a strategic plan together, or was it pretty much, let's just keep moving? What was your process at the beginning of what I'm planning to do next?
So like I said, at the beginning, I thought that I could manage it all. Quickly realized that I couldn't. Took a step back, realized that my sisters and I have the exact perfect personalities and strengths to divvy everything up in a way that makes sense. Me as the creative, I take care of marketing and buying, primarily. My oldest sister, Randy, she is very analytical and very tech savvy, and she loves a good spreadsheet. She's a planner by nature. So she takes care of the financial operations. And then my other sister, Renee, she's the second one, I'm the youngest. Renee is actually really good at telling people what to do. Like, you know, as a little girl, oh, you're so bossy, so bossy. She's that bossy kid. And she's the person we all need to keep us on our P's and Q's, remind us to do things. And she's an idea person as well. I'm definitely the biggest idea person, but I love that she also will kind of check my ideas, and we all work really well. We sound each other off and work together really harmoniously to.
And she's HR?
Yeah, she deals with HR.
So almost all the aspects of the business you share across, but you're the lead of it. Yeah. How do you handle conflicts? Not necessarily between you three, but in the business in general, related to staffing or even regulatory wise, the mall side. How do you handle conflicts compared to even just to yourself, and maybe compared to previous persons in the role as well?
That is interesting. Okay, so Mr. Robinson, as he knew the staff for such a long period of time, he had a different kind of relationship with them. They definitely saw him as a peer and as a boss figure, versus me, a lot of them I could be their child, definitely not their peer, but I could either be their child, but now they've had to accept that I'm in this leadership position at the place where they work. So dealing with conflict, it's quite delicate, but I always try to remain respectful and honest, and even if there isn't a moment of conflict, before you even get to conflict, by being genuine with people about what your expectations are and having genuine interest in them, it makes it a lot easier when conflict does arise. People realize it's not about actually having a clash or an argument. It's just about resolving a problem. You know, so any issues that we have on any aspect, be it with a vendor, with a member of staff, or even on the family level, it's about the problem, not about me having a problem with you. you know. So focusing on it being just focusing on the solution, not so much focusing on making it a personal problem has been the way I deal with.
So, you know,
Did
you
that
meant,
make sense?
You did very well.
so, you know, like you guys recently made a very big change, right? The company's logo, right? Now the logo or the icon is BB, right? And I'm sure that must have been quite a change. You're talking about decades of having the same, you know, logo you had previously. So, you know, walk us through that creative process, right? You're talking about rebranding of a business, right? And what I'm getting to is just speaking about the importance of innovation and the importance of adapting, right? We've seen over the years countless brands have understood that less is more, right? And as we have, you know, listeners or viewers who they have a business and they're thinking about how do they rebrand, how do they, you know, improve the positioning of the brand in the minds of customers and potential customers. Just walk us through that creative process. Let us know how you made the decision and how you landed at that particular rendering of the logo.
Alrighty, so interestingly, this isn't the second or third logo that Bonneville Bones has had.
Okay.
So as you know, the name wasn't even Bonneville Bones in the beginning.
Correct.
So there was that logo.
Yeah, the London, yeah.
Then they moved into, it actually looked very similar to what we have now. It was just BB in like a transparent bamboo font with Bonneville Bones written out at the bottom. So that was actually kind of the inspiration for the one that we have now. And then they migrated to the red and white with the oval that we still have. So when I was moving the Bay Street location to Harbor Bay and going smaller, I leaned into the original name, the London Boutique, and keeping the other part with Bonneville and just called it the Bonneville Boutique. It is smaller, and as we continue to evolve in that location, I wanted to feel more cozy and boutique-like with seating and like a space where people can get comfortable while they shop. So that's how I landed there. Like you said, paring it back to not so much going on, not such a loud color, black and white. Black was one of my father's favorite colors. Black is my favorite color. Those are the things that influenced how we got there.
So why did you make the change? Was it that, hey, we want to just refresh the brand, or we were trying to adjust our focus, or what was the reason for? We have a lot of companies who've had the same name for a very long time, same logo for a very long time. Sometimes when they switch the brand, they lose the relatability to the persons who in the past. Sometimes it highlights the business. When you're looking at how to navigate that, why did you make the decision, and did you see the results that you wanted to immediately?
Did I see the results immediately? No. I think that a lot of people did still expect to see just Bonneville Bones in red and white, or they would say to us, oh, I didn't realize y'all were even here in Harbor Bay because the logo is different. But now that it's been there for just over a year, people are realizing, oh, that is Bonneville Bones. It's just a slightly different take on it. I think that it's taken us where I wanted it to be. And as for why, I think having taken on the business from my dad and everything that came with that, like it was such a weighty and emotional experience for me. I think that putting my own touch on it made it feel a little bit more personal. It made it feel a little bit more like my baby now, not just carrying this big piece of luggage on my back that was my father's.
Right.
Let's take this down, unpack this a little bit, and keep what we want, you know? So it's still in honoring his legacy, but making it my own.
Well, what advice would you give to some entrepreneur, whether it's a 2-year-old company or a legacy business, and they're considering rebranding or they're considering changing some things up? What advice would you give them when it comes to that?
I think it's important to know what your strengths are. So if you're not a person that is naturally good at, say, marketing or styling, definitely reach out to a professional for those kind of services. I think that a lot of times when we rely too heavily on our own insight, we kind of you lose impactfulness, the potential for being very impactful. So ask for help, basically.
Yeah.
Come up with a few ideas, show it to some people, get feedback. That's the best thing I could say. If you want to rebrand or brand at all, just get feedback from those around you.
I would say also, you don't put yourself in a box. You know, times change, but also don't just be so fluid where anything that changes you move. And so
True.
you look at the Instagram, the TikToks, where fads are in and out. Bonneville Bones has survived through all of these areas, the MySpace areas. You go to Snapchat, you go through a lot of areas, pre-social media post. And so why do you feel the Bonneville Bone brand has stayed so strong through all of these different ventures? And for a business looking to create that type of longevity, what advice would you give? So the first one, why do you feel Bonneville Bones has made it through so far? And then secondly, was what advice would you give to a person trying to create the same?
Okay, again, that's a knock at my dad for being so resilient and having a good understanding of what people want in terms of accessibility and also what they want to buy. I watched him do it, and I've learned to do it in my own way as well. So when you look at, say, the COVID era, or when the whole COVID era, that's funny, when COVID first had everything shut down and locked down, everyone was like, oh my goodness, we need to do online sales, this and that, delivery, and if you followed up everything that everyone was doing, for behemoth vernacular, you'll be running around like a chicken without a head trying to keep up with all these different things. So trying to just kind of keep your head down and focus on what it is people really want, and the most cost-effective way to do it without losing your mind was important. We didn't do any of that delivery and bringing sales to being online and all this. At one point we was doing it old school, you could even make an appointment and I'll meet you at the store. It was actually really personal because now this person having a wedding or a funeral and I'm getting to meet people that want to make large purchases. So like you were establishing good relationships with people and getting a feel for what it is that others might want. So to answer your question is to pay attention to what locals really need and want, or whoever your demographic focus is, the best way to access them. For some company, depending on what you're selling, online sales might be best.
Yeah.
But we're selling clothing on a 7x21 island.
How viable is it?
Agreed.
Okay, do I really need to send this in FedEx to meet you in Seabreeze? No, meet me at the mall, meet me downtown, meet me at Harbor Bay.
I completely agree.
That's a good joke, actually. But what I wanted to ask you too is,
I missed the second part of this question.
No, you answered
No,
the
I
second
think you
part
did.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you did.
So I had a follow-up question
Yeah,
for
go,
you as
go,
well.
go.
So you're in retail as well.
Yep.
And so how do you as well not get tunnel vision or just too reactive to the market? So how do you make sure we're actually, what I'm thinking is going on is actually what the people want?
That's actually the question I was going to ask.
Oh,
too.
sorry.
But that's perfect because one of my question is going to be, you mentioned about understanding what the customer wants, and I think it's super important because a lot of times business persons, they tend to listen to themselves, right? And they think that what they want, what they need, in some instances is exactly what the customer wants, and you realize very quickly that that's not the case. So one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I'll answer the next question too, is like, how did you listen to the customer? Like, by what means did you listen to the customer, right? Or was it that you kind of looked at macro trends, applied it locally, and said, okay, this is probably what's going to work? So I'll stick up in there. And then to answer the next question about the same transition, I guess, is, I mean, what we did was we just stayed true to self, right? And we had enough data to understand what customers want, when they want it, and how they wanted it, right? Whether that's through social media, whether that's through emails that customers send back to us. In terms of pricing, that was something that was a bit tricky because you got inflation going on, right? And you had to figure out, okay, is this enough of an affordable indulgence that persons will still decide to want to buy it? And so we use those combination of things, and then just trial and error too. We obviously have a website, so we tried that, but we found that yes, we had sales in the U.S., but the sort of bread and butter at that time of our business was the local customer. And the local customer just wanted to be able to talk to someone on the phone, tell you where they can meet you, and meet up, give a handshake, give a dap. Some people give you hugs, and they get their product, and they're happy. And they send the WhatsApp and a picture after that, and they're good to go. So it's just about just being true to self and just trying to find ways to listen to the customer.
I learned the lesson, again, initially from my dad. Going on buying trips from the age of 16 and sitting in front of these vendors with all these stuff that I think are hideous, but we can't sell enough of it, you know? So it's not about my personal taste, it's about what's selling, what people are asking for. That was the first lesson I had in that. And I mean, I'm telling you, the arguments me and my dad would have in front of those vendors, I'm just like, Daddy, I can't let you buy this. This is so hideous. La, 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 la. He's like, hush. Watch and learn. Okay? And the stuff would sell out. And the funny thing about men's fashion is you could sell the same style of jeans for like a decade. We have styles of jeans that we had been selling from we was around the corner in our first location in the mall. And people are still asking for that pair of jeans. That's just how men are. So, one, I learned a lesson from Daddy. Next was actually working the floor for years in the summer or even straight out of high school, working the floor, working with customers and hearing what it is that they're asking for, and understanding what kind of variety people want to see. Who are the people that are frequenting the store the most, so where we need to do more skinny jeans or more relaxed fit jeans, or now it's the opposite way, or now it's slowly turning back.
In the 90s now.
We slowly turning back to the wide leg jeans. So you just kind of got to pay attention. And the interesting thing about the Bahamas is, and that what's happening, when I was first on the floor at the age of 14, 15, 16, even up until about early 20s, my early 20s, fashion over here was always about 3 to 5 years behind what was happening in the States. On top of that, that's for the fashionable person. The fashionable person was 3 to 5 years behind. Okay, the less fashionable person was like 10 years behind. So with the internet, the TikTok, and the MySpace and whatever else, everybody having so much more access, visual-wise, to what's popular, what's not popular. They go away to school. It's not even just about what's on cable TV anymore. It's literally in their hand. Yeah. People all over the world dress in a different kind of way. So it's brought us up to speed a lot faster. But still, the majority, I would say now we at least like 2 years behind fashion-wise. The average person is about 2 years behind U.S. fashion. Yeah, so we catching up, but we're still behind. So those are the little things I had to kind of pay attention to. Working on the floor, listening to my dad, who was my main mentor as I learned to be a buyer, and something that he wasn't privy to as I am now is watching social media and what people are exposed to. And now and again, I'll take myself out, go to Bahama, I'll go somewhere, go to like a soga or something, just to see what people are wearing, what people want.
So
you gotta pay attention.
So, you know, like as we kind of get to the end here, I want to talk about the future. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've kind of walked through the history of Bonneville Bones. We've talked about what changes have occurred, challenges, right, getting through COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And so now we're at a point now we've, you know, just had a new, like you say, sort of a redo of the logo, right? You've kind of found your footing, mm-hmm. right? Talk to us a little bit about the future. Like what should people expect from Bonneville Bones moving forward? What should they look forward to?
That's kind of a layered thing because the main focus I have is being more organized in the background and working alongside with my sisters to hopefully give myself more room to provide the customers an even better experience. So the two go hand in hand. No, the customer is not going to see what's going on in the back office or via emails and everything. But when you look at a store, it's not just about the clothes hanging up on the wall. It's about the business side of it. So in terms of the future, I want us to have make solid business-minded decisions as a collective so that we can survive another 50 years.
And you mentioned your father was a big part of your mentorship. Mm-hmm. With him now unfortunately passed, how do you then get that information now as you're navigating it? So before, you're under his umbrella and he's teaching you so he can kind of help. Now you're in a position where you're at the helm. Mm-hmm. How do you get advice? How do you get information to say, I'm going to get stronger, get better, and more efficient?
That's a good one. I don't know. If I'm being honest, I don't know. I'm working on it. And again, I reach out to those around me, those that I trust, those that are still there. I look to them, the staff that have been with him all those years, my sisters, and talking to other young business people and to see what we're all kind of facing and dealing with, and just keep keep moving forward.
So at Master in Finance, we always talk about mentorship, networking, because it's imperative. All of us are here are successful. And a big part of it is mentorship, whether it's for family or person's friends or just colleagues. And so a big thing for all entrepreneurs, whether you're in the corporate world or you're in entrepreneurship, mentorship is critical. You know, someone to help you. So no one knows it all. There's nobody who knows it all. Everyone needs assistance. And so mentorship is important. So please take that point from here that someone helped Ryen, and it helped me and Jarrell as well through our good days and even the bad days. Yeah. And so what does innovation mean for you for this business? So some persons say innovation is to tech. It's the easier way that the client can get it. What is innovation for you in your leadership?
It goes full circle. Innovation for me is listening and producing based on what I've heard. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Being a good listener for me is what it means to be innovative, at least in a customer-based industry setting. You got to be able to listen and provide.
And for you now, I have one more on this. Leadership. Watching Mr. Robinson, your father, now yourself as leader for 3 years now. What do you take home to be what does a leadership mean to you?
It's honestly an aspect of the position that I run away from. Because because being a leader means that you are also responsible for these people. And that can be extremely heavy. Like carrying the feeling of, look, if I make a bad decision, 12 people will be out of a job. There's some families that ain't gonna eat. So leadership is, although people like to say, oh, I'm the leader, I'm in charge, that does not excite me, to be honest with you. I don't like just go to bed so happy at night knowing that I'm in charge of all this stuff. Oh yeah, like it's actually terrifying. It's actually completely nerve-wracking. And the way I've gotten through the position of leadership is by not even seeing it as leadership. I'm trying to see it more so as service. Even though these people work for my sisters and I work for them. It is my job to keep them employed. It is my job to keep them satisfied with their positions and comfortable, make sure the AC on and the toilet working. Like it's the little things, or to host the occasional staff party or things to make them feel appreciated outside of their salary.
So serving leadership.
It's about the service, yeah.
So, you know, and I think this may be the last question here, but I think it's fitting. You've referenced your father in two ways, right? You've called him Dad, and you've called him Mr. Robinson. For the last 3 to 4 years, many would say that you have, you know, inherited, you've innovated, and you're upholding a legacy. What do you think Mr. Robinson would say to you right now?
Look at you trying to make me emotional. I think he would say that he's proud of us, not just me. He's proud of my sisters and I. I'm sure if he had enough time, he'd definitely give me a lot of criticism about the mistakes I've made, about the stupid mistakes I've made. And it'll only be fair, because that's what parents do. They let you know where you've gone wrong so you can get it right. But I think he'd be very happy to see that we're making an effort to work together and keep the legacy going.
Amazing.
When it comes to entrepreneurs who are listening, those who may just be becoming leaders, or those who have ambitions to be leaders, what advice would you give to them about the realities of it? When you finally see on top of the mountaintop, it's not as pretty as it looks climbing it. What's the advice to persons seeking to be leaders, or about to become leaders, or right now, they are a leader right now, struggling, they're just starting and trying to navigate it? What's the advice to them?
Netflix, right?
That's an interesting one.
I watched the series Vikings at least 3 times. And something that Ragnar said was he never wanted to be king of Norway or any of that stuff. And he said to his son Bjorn, if you want to be leader, you want to be a good leader, you have to be prepared to bend down and pick it up. People think that leadership, like I said a moment ago, is some lofty exciting thing. It is so stressful if you're doing it properly, if you're actually going to be a good leader. Not to make it religious, but Jesus, as our leader, he humbled himself and set the example of washing their feet and serving those that decided to follow him. So it's that kind of loving touch, that humble touch to leadership that makes you a good leader. You make people want to follow you because you have a personal interest in them and a personal interest in us all surviving and being successful.
Yeah, and the reference, to support your Vikings reference, so I'm a fan. There's a scene that beyond kind of fulfills that very thing at the end of his life. They were about to go to war, and he was supposed to ride out ahead of the infantry, and arrows from the opposition started coming towards him, and he got hit several times.
He was already half dead.
He was already half dead. The one thing he needed to do on that horse at that point was raise his sword for them to attack. And in the last seconds of his life, with the last bit of energy, you can call it supernatural energy for the amount of times he got struck, he raised his sword, and the war began, and they won. And so I think to support Ryan's point is the stress, the burden, the good times, the bad times of business is just like that. You ride it on that horse, and you go ahead, right, servant leadership, and you get to that point where you're going to make this transition to get to that next stage, or in the case of the war, to conquer this next piece of land. And it takes that leader using every single ounce of them to give the signal, to send the right message, to give the right communication for the team to proceed and win the war. And so I think you've done an excellent job so far.
Yes.
And I think for all of our viewers and listeners of Mastering Finance, this is exactly what we hope to do. All right? We hope to tell the stories of persons who have been involved in business and are fighting that good fight, climbing the mountaintop, like Nick said. So as a woman in business and retail, share a little bit about your experience being in an industry that many would argue it's one of those that would be considered somewhat male dominated, right? And having a team that was led by your father, right? And then the partners before that who were men as well. So talk to us about being a woman in business and kind of taking on that responsibility.
It's definitely got a different set of challenges than I think men face. Women, we are naturally very cyclical creatures. So we experience a lot of ups and downs in a short period of time. So that's why it makes it so important for us to outsource so that we can follow our own natural ebb and flow of how we're experiencing life at any given point in time. I think that a lot of times women don't necessarily like to admit to that particular weakness, but I think acknowledging it gives you more strength because you can better navigate how to deal with when these things happen. As simple as getting pregnant and having not as simple as, especially getting pregnant and having a child, and you're still in a leadership position, you have all these responsibilities when really you just want to be home with taking care of your family. It's not easy at all. And like I mentioned earlier, I didn't even consider myself to be well suited to the role, but the only way I was able to do it was to acknowledge my weaknesses and find ways to kind of bolster up and create like firewalls to protect my femininity, so to speak, and to still get the job done.
And one more question. So what advice would you give a woman who wants to pursue entrepreneurship? Like, what are the top 3 things you would say, here are the things you should focus on and keep front of mind?
I would say to be prepared to have to change often, in terms of you may have an initial idea or concept of how you expect your business plan to go, but women are inclined to change all the time. So even on a grander scale, like say not just a period of 4 weeks, but a period of 5 years, a woman is going to change a lot, or can change a lot, if she gets married, if she has a child, all these things, all these responsibilities that are usually rest on the shoulders of women. We have to be able to change course at a drop of a dime. It's an art almost. The second thing is to not necessarily think that you have to do it all on your own. Always, if possible, keep tabs on people in your life that are able to help. Be it a grandmother, be it a friend, or even if it's just hiring someone to assist if you're in a position to do that. And also being prepared for the fact that you might have to do it all by yourself. So it's kind of an oxymoron. If you can't get help, you have to be prepared for, like, if this is something I want to do and I need it done now, sometimes you just gotta face the fact that your back is against the wall, put them babies on your back, and let's go uphill.
Excellent,
Awesome.
excellent.
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
I think that's it. And so we want to thank you guys for tuning in. Ryen, thank you for being a guest on Mastering Finance.
Yes.
And guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe. See you on the next one.